Hello everybody. Thanks again for visiting my YouTube channel. This is the place where we discuss the Lord's Recovery Movement of Witness Lee, also known as the local church movement. I got a request to listen to some messages given by Minoru Chen in August of this year. It was a few meetings where he spoke directly to the women in the church, to the sisters. I felt to take down this message and redo it after learning some more things that Minoru Chen said about the expectations on women in the Lord's recovery. One thing that was pretty startling, well, two things really. He said, if the elders fail, it's the fault of the sisters. And he said the sisters have to do just about everything. Now, maybe in his strange world that this was meant to be some sort of compliment to the sisters, that they are very crucial and actually the elders can't take credit for success. It's actually the sisters. But the way he did it was in a way of putting expectations and guilt on the women in the church. It's hard to say what he was doing, but it was just a strange way to communicate, to say that kind of thing. And so I'm not quite sure what to say about it other than, again, I've said that the Lord's Recovery has a very conservative, traditional, when I say traditional, I mean from another time view of the roles of women and men and the relationship of women and men and the expectations of how women should be seen and not heard, sort of thing. That's what he was saying, that the gossip thing where they can't talk, all they can do is pray, just pray, pray, pray. I've heard some of the women complain about the expectations that are put upon the women in the church and the few options they have and so forth. And I can definitely see that because you don't have many options. Of course, the brothers don't have many options either when you get right down to it. But they have more than the women. But really, there's not that many options in the Lord's Recovery for anybody. They're all pretty unattractive. Unless you get to be the minister of the age, then you get to be the big shot. But other than that, you're kind of just a little cog in the wheel of the machine, and that's part of the problem, is that it's a machine. There's no heart at the center of it. It's just a system that everybody is expected to plug themselves into and find their place and go along with it. And this is one reason I emphasize the whole idea of, if you want to leave the Lord's Recovery, go ahead and do it. They don't have a right to keep you there. Because we can spend the rest of our lives talking about reasons to leave. We can spend the rest of our lives talking about what they do wrong. All they're going to say is, no, we're not doing anything wrong, and yes, what we do is scriptural. And as I've said before, a reasonable person is just going to eventually say, fine, I'm out of here. But that's what they try to slam the door on, is telling, no, 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 you can't leave because we're the Lord's Recovery and we're the only true expression of the church. And you know the routine. And so this is one reason I don't spend a whole lot of time on the minutiae of their doctrine. There's a lot of things I could talk about. I could talk about their doctrine about Satan indwelling man's flesh. I could talk about the fallacy of the doctrine of mingling, of God being wrought into our being or worked into our being and all that kind of thing. There's a lot of things I could take issue with from a biblical standpoint. In other words, start arguing theology. But all they would do is come back and say I'm wrong. Okay, that is why I focus on, if you don't like it there, then leave. Okay, I'm not saying that in a way of trying to put anybody down. It's just that that's really what it comes down to. That's really what it comes down to. And if you have left, you know why you left. And it wasn't because you weren't strong enough or you didn't have enough grace. No, it's because something was going on there that wasn't right. It doesn't matter because there's lots of places you can meet. That's the way God made it. He didn't make it so we all have to be in the same place, listening to the same teachers. That is just a recipe for failure, because the teachers go bad, then you're stuck with them. And that's what you have in the Lord's Recovery. As far as the sisters go, as I've said before, in general, the Bible does tell us to submit to one another. We're supposed to have an attitude of service. toward people of love. We're not supposed to be trying to dominate others. We're supposed to be trying to serve them. Service is an expression of love to God. It's not an actual legal subjugation of the person we're serving. We're doing it voluntarily. As I've said before, love is always voluntary. If you're in a situation where you feel like you have to serve and you don't want to, it's not an act of love, and you can't make it an act of love, then probably you don't need to be doing it. It just doesn't work. And so this is why it's important to realize love is a choice. It's a choice. It's something you choose to do. It's not something anybody can make you do. Subjugation of women in the Lord's recovery and this kind of thing is a symptom of a larger problem, which is the idea that they can get away with it because they're all that and they are the one true thing, and so there's no other place for you to go. But if you vote with your feet, and if enough people vote with their feet, they're not going to have anybody to push around anymore. And so that's why I focus on that, because that's the linchpin, as I said before, that they feel like they can keep people there. And as I said, I don't like to sound like a broken record, but there's two ways to approach it. I can point at all their failures in all kinds of different ways, and they could turn around and say, well, it doesn't matter because we're still the Lord's recovery. Or I could hit this thing about the Lord's recovery is not something you can claim to be exclusively. So that's what I do, because my feeling is if you take the lock off the door, then people can leave. They don't have to sit there and talk about the door or the walls or why they didn't like the door, or why they didn't like the walls, or why they didn't like the floor or the bed or anything like that. They can just leave and find another place. I'm not a counselor. I can't help that much with trauma. If there are things about the Lord's recovery that stay with you, I've shared a few things, but I am not qualified to be a counselor to women who have been abused. I'm just not. And I would be on dangerous ground if I tried, and so I can't fulfill that role. All I can do is tell people, look, you don't have to stay there if you don't want to. And if you're stuck in a family, if you have family issues, or husband issues, that's a lot more complicated than I'm qualified to comment on, other than to say there's two things. There's the rock and the hard place, but in God's view, there's also grace. And grace can get us through. But it's up to you to decide what you can deal with and what you can't deal with. And that's why you have to decide in your own heart what you're going to do. So I hope that helps. Don't think I'll do much more commenting on this issue until I have more information and feel like I am as informed as I need to be. So thanks again for listening. Take care.